He found two dying babies in the snow outside his mansion. He had no idea they belonged to the only woman he ever truly loved. And he definitely didn't know that saving them would put his entire life in danger. But here's the most shocking part. When he finally discovered the truth about who their mother was, he broke down and cried for the first time in 20 years. This is a true story that will absolutely wreck you. Stay with me, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Welcome to the story room. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. You know, sometimes life has a way of completely turning your world upside down when you least expect it. This is one of those stories. A story about how one frozen night changed absolutely everything for a man who thought he had it all figured out. Meet James Carter, 33 years old, owner of one of the most successful real estate development companies in Boston. The kind of man who wore $1,000 suits, drove luxury cars, and lived in a mansion that looked like something out of a magazine. His days were filled with contracts, construction projects, and million-dollar deals. His nights? Usually spent alone in his enormous house, reviewing blueprints and planning his next big venture. James had convinced himself he was happy. He had money. He had success. He had respect. What else could a man possibly need? But deep down, in a place he refused to look, there was an emptiness he couldn't quite name. It was a bitter January night in Boston. The kind of night where the wind cuts through you like a knife and the snow falls so thick you can barely see your hand in front of your face. James stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, watching the blizzard rage outside. Something felt strange about this night. He couldn't put his finger on it, but it was like the universe was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Then it came. A buzzing sound from a security system. Someone had pressed the button at his front gate. James frowned, checking the security cameras on his phone. Nothing but swirling snow and darkness. Who on earth would be out in weather like this? Hello, he spoke into the intercom, his voice echoing into the storm. Is anyone there? Silence. Just the howl of the wind. But James couldn't shake the feeling. Something was pulling him outside. Call it instinct, call it fate, call it whatever you want. He grabbed his heavy winter coat and stepped out into the freezing night. The cold hit him like a wall. Snow stung his face, and the wind nearly knocked him over. He could barely see where he was going, but he pushed forward toward the gate, one difficult step at a time. That's when he heard it. The sound that would haunt him and bless him for the rest of his life. Crying. Small, desperate, baby cries growing weaker by the second. James's heart jumped into his throat. He ran, stumbling through knee-deep snow until he reached the gate. And there, nearly buried by the falling snow, were two small bundles. Pink and blue blankets barely moving. He fell to his knees, his hands shaking as he pulled back the blankets. Two babies. Newborn twins. Their tiny faces were red and cold, their eyes wide with terror. Their cries, so weak it broke something inside him. No, 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 James whispered, his voice cracking. Hold on, babies. Please hold on. That's when he saw it. A note, tucked into one of the blankets, the paper already wet from the snow. With trembling fingers, he unfolded it and read the words that would change his life forever. Please keep them safe. When everything is right, I will return. In that moment, standing in the freezing snow with two dying babies in his arms, James Carter broke down. This man who never cried, who prided himself on being tough and controlled, stood there with tears streaming down his face. Because looking at these two helpless little lives, he realized something. None of his money, none of his success, none of it meant anything compared to this moment. One of the babies let out a weak whimper, snapping him back to action. There was no time for questions. No time for thinking. These children were dying, and he was their only hope. James gathered both babies close to his chest, wrapping his coat around them to share his body heat. The walk back to the house was the longest journey of his life. Every step was a battle against the wind. The snow tried to blind him. The cold tried to steal his strength. But James kept going, protecting those tiny lives with everything he had. When he finally burst through his front door, he was exhausted, soaked to the bone, and shaking from head to toe. But the babies were alive. That was all that mattered. James stood in his pristine living room, holding these two small miracles, and suddenly realized he had absolutely no idea what to do. His house was filled with expensive furniture and artwork, but nothing a baby could possibly need. No bottles, no diapers, no cribs. Nothing. With shaking hands, he laid the babies gently on his leather couch, surrounding them with cushions. Then he grabbed his phone and called his family doctor. "Dr. Patterson, I need you here now. It's life or death." "James? What happened? Are you injured?" "No, I found babies. 2 newborn babies in the snow. Please just come. Hurry." While waiting, James did the only thing he could think of. He talked to them. Softly, gently, promising them things he never thought he'd say. "You're safe now, little ones. I don't know who you are or where you came from, but I promise you, I'm going to take care of you. Nobody will ever hurt you again." The words came from somewhere deep in his soul. And as he said them, James Carter, the man who thought he had his whole life planned out, realized everything had just changed. These weren't just abandoned babies that needed temporary help. No. Looking into their small, innocent faces, he knew. These were his children now. Dr. Patterson arrived within 30 minutes, medical bag in hand, eyes wide with shock at the scene before him. "James, what in God's name?" "Please, doctor. Just check them. Make sure they're okay." The examination felt like it took forever. Every second was agony. Finally, Dr. Patterson looked up with relief in his eyes. "They're remarkably healthy, all things considered. Dehydrated and cold, but alive. James, these babies are only a few days old. Someone must have just given birth." "What do they need?" James asked, hanging on every word. The doctor explained everything. Feeding schedules, how to prepare formula, diaper changing, temperature control. James absorbed it all like his life depended on it. Because now, their lives did depend on him. "James," Dr. Patterson said carefully, "you know we have to call Child Protective Services. These babies were abandoned. There are procedures." "Not yet," James interrupted, his voice firm. "Please, just give me a little time." The doctor studied him, seeing something in James's eyes he'd never seen before. Finally, he nodded. 24 hours. But no longer. After the doctor left, James sat on the floor next to the couch, watching the twins sleep. They looked so peaceful now, so perfect. He reached out and gently touched one tiny hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his thumb, and James felt his heart crack wide open. "Who are you?" he whispered. "And why do I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for you to find me?" Let me tell you, that first night was absolutely insane. James didn't sleep for even 1 minute. The twins woke up every 2 hours, screaming their little lungs out. And this man, who could negotiate deals worth millions without breaking a sweat, had absolutely no clue what to do with a crying baby. Picture this. 3 in the morning. James standing in his designer kitchen in his pajamas, holding a screaming baby in one arm while trying to warm up a bottle with the other hand. The bottle was too hot, then too cold. Then he couldn't figure out how to get the baby to actually drink from it. And don't even get me started on the diapers. The first diaper he tried to put on literally fell off the second he set the baby down. The second one was on backwards. By the 5th attempt, he was sitting on the bathroom floor, covered in baby formula and exhaustion, nearly crying himself. But here's the thing. He didn't give up. Not once. Every time those babies cried, James was there. Every time they needed something, he tried his absolute best. His expensive suits got ruined. His perfect schedule went out the window. Business calls were interrupted by screaming babies. But you know what? For the first time in his life, James didn't care about any of that. After 3 days of complete chaos, James knew he needed help. That's when he found Isabella, a warm-hearted nanny from Colombia who had 30 years of experience with children. She walked into that mansion, took one look at the exhausted James trying to feed both babies at once, and immediately took charge. "Ay, senor," she said with a kind smile. "Let Isabella show you how it's done." She taught him everything. how to hold a bottle at the right angle, how to burp a baby properly, how to tell the difference between an "I'm hungry" cry and an "I need a diaper change" cry. She was patient when he made mistakes, encouraging when he got frustrated. "Mr. James," Isabella said one afternoon, watching him rock one of the babies with surprising gentleness, "you have a good heart. These babies, they are very lucky to have you." James looked down at the baby in his arms and felt something warm spread through his chest. "I think I'm the lucky one, Isabella." It was on a quiet Sunday evening, about 2 weeks after finding the twins, that James finally named them. He was sitting in the nursery he'd had quickly set up, holding both babies and watching the sunset paint the sky in colors of pink and gold. The name came to him like a whisper from his heart. "Emma," he said softly to the baby in his left arm, touching her tiny nose. "Because you're everything I never knew I needed." He turned to the baby in his right arm. "And Ava, because your presence is like a beautiful song I want to hear forever." Emma and Ava, his daughters, his family. The twins seemed to approve, responding with sweet coos and the kind of gummy smiles that make your heart melt. And in that perfect moment, something shifted deep inside James. These weren't just babies he was temporarily caring for. They were his daughters, his purpose, his everything. But even as his love for the twins grew stronger every day, James couldn't stop wondering about their mother. Who was she? Why did she leave them? Was she safe out there somewhere? He hired the best private investigators money could buy. "Find out everything you can," he told them. "I need to know where these babies came from." Weeks went by. The investigators searched hospital records, missing person reports, birth certificates. They came up empty every single time. It was like Emma and Ava had simply appeared out of thin air. No records. No history. Nothing. Meanwhile, James's entire life had transformed completely. His mornings started with the twins climbing all over him in bed, demanding breakfast and playtime. His afternoons were spent working from home, with Isabella watching the girls, but James always nearby, never wanting to miss a moment. His evenings? Those belonged entirely to Emma and Ava. He read them stories every night, doing different voices for each character. He sang them lullabies, even though he couldn't carry a tune to save his life. He played peekaboo until his face hurt from smiling. He took thousands of photos, terrified of forgetting a single precious moment. Emma and Ava developed such different personalities. Emma was bold and curious, always wanting to explore everything. The moment she learned to crawl, she was off like a rocket, investigating every corner of the house. Ava was gentler, more observant. She could sit for the longest time, just watching the world around her with those big, thoughtful eyes. James found himself completely transformed. His business partners barely recognized him anymore. The cold, calculating developer who only cared about profits was gone. In his place was a man who left meetings early to get home for bath time. A man who turned down business trips because he didn't want to be away from his daughters. But late at night, after the girls were asleep, James would sometimes stand by their cribs and worry. What if someone came looking for them? What if their biological mother returned? What if he lost them? The thought made his chest tight with panic. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was late afternoon, about 4 months after he'd found the twins. His lead investigator's voice was urgent on the other end. "Mr. Carter, we might have something. There's a missing person case in Providence, Rhode Island. A young woman and newborn twins disappeared around the same time you found Emma and Ava." James's heart started racing. "Tell me everything." "Her name is Natalie Brooks. She vanished from a small town about 2 hours from Boston. Her husband reported her missing, claiming she was unstable and kidnapped their children." James felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "I'll be there tomorrow." That night, James couldn't sleep. He stood in the nursery, watching Emma and Ava breathe softly in their cribs. The thought of losing them was unbearable. But if this Natalie was their mother, if she was out there searching for them, didn't he have a responsibility to help reunite them? "What am I supposed to do?" he whispered into the darkness. The next morning, James kissed both girls goodbye, holding them extra tight. Isabella promised to take good care of them. With a heavy heart, James drove to Providence, not knowing that he was about to discover a truth that would break his heart and change everything all over again. The drive to Providence felt like the longest 2 hours of James's life. His mind wouldn't stop racing with possibilities. Who was this Natalie Brooks? Could she really be Emma and Ava's mother? And if she was, what did that mean for him? For the family he'd built? Providence was a charming coastal city, but James barely noticed its beauty. He drove straight to the small town where Natalie had disappeared from, a quiet place called Millbrook just outside the city. James checked into a small bed and breakfast and immediately started his investigation. He visited the local coffee shop, the grocery store, anywhere people might gather and talk. In small towns like this, everybody knows everybody's business. It was at a little diner on Main Street that James got his first real lead. He sat at the counter, ordered coffee, and struck up a conversation with a waitress, a friendly woman named Beth. "You new in town?" she asked, refilling his cup. "Just visiting," James replied with a casual smile. "Seems like a nice, quiet place." "Oh, it is. Well, usually. We did have some excitement a few months back." Beth leaned in, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. A young woman went missing. Took her newborn babies with her. James's pulse quickened. That must have been scary for the town. "It was strange, is what it was," Beth continued. "Natalie was such a sweet girl. Worked at the bookstore down the street. But her husband..." She shook her head. "Let's just say he had a temper. Folks around here weren't surprised when she left, if you know what I mean." James absorbed this information carefully. "Do you know what happened to her?" Beth shrugged. "Vanished without a trace. Some people say she ran away. Others think something worse happened. Her husband, Kevin, he's still around, telling anyone who will listen that she kidnapped his children." After finishing his coffee, James walked around town, gathering more pieces of the puzzle. He talked to the owner of the bookstore where Natalie had worked. He chatted with neighbors. And slowly, a picture began to form. Natalie had been quiet and kind, loved by everyone who knew her. Kevin, her husband, was a successful real estate investor, but he was known for his controlling behavior and violent temper. People had seen bruises on Natalie. They'd heard the fights. Then James met Walter, an elderly man who had been Natalie's friend and mentor. James found him tending the garden at the local church. "You're asking about Natalie," Walter said, not even looking up from his work. "Why?" James hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. "I think I might have information that could help find her." Walter finally looked up, his blue eyes sharp and assessing. "Information like what?" "Like, I think I might know where her babies are." The old man's eyes widened. He set down his gardening tools and gestured to a nearby bench. "Sit. Tell me everything." James told him the whole story. The snowy night, the twins at his gate, the note, how he'd been caring for them. Walter listened intently, his expression growing softer with each word. "Those babies are safe?" he asked when James finished. "Completely safe. I love them like they're my own." Walter nodded slowly, then said something that made James's heart stop. Natalie used to talk about a man she dated in college. Said he was the kindest person she'd ever known. She always wondered what happened to him.
He paused.
His name was James. The world seemed to tilt. James felt like he couldn't breathe. What was Natalie's maiden name? Brooks was her married name. Before that, she was Natalie Hayes. Natalie Hayes. His Natalie. The woman he'd loved with all his heart in college. The one he'd planned a future with before life pulled them in different directions. James remembered it all so clearly now. They'd met in an economics class their sophomore year. She was studying English literature, dreaming of becoming a novelist. He was focused on business, already planning his first real estate venture. They fell in love so easily, so completely. And if you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, because this is only the beginning. They spent every moment they could together. Long walks discussing their dreams. Late nights studying in the library. Lazy Sunday mornings imagining their future. They talked about getting married someday, having children, building a life together. But after graduation, reality hit hard. James got an incredible job offer in Boston. Natalie was accepted into a prestigious writing program in Chicago. They tried long distance, but the miles and the demands of their new lives eventually pulled them apart. The last time James saw Natalie was at the train station. Both of them were crying, promising to stay in touch. But like so many young loves, they drifted apart as time moved on. And now, sitting on this bench in Providence, James realized the twins he'd been raising for 4 months were Natalie's daughters. His Natalie, the woman he'd never really stopped loving. "Where is she?" James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please. I need to find her." Walter shook his head sadly. "I don't know. She came to me the night before she disappeared. Said she was terrified of Kevin, that she needed to protect her babies. She had a plan, but she didn't tell me details. Probably to keep me safe." James stood up, determination flooding through him. "I'm going to find her. And I'm going to make sure she and those babies are safe. All of them together." He spent the next week in Providence, searching for any clue about where Natalie might have gone. His team of investigators worked around the clock, tracking bank transactions, following leads, checking every possible hiding place. Finally, they caught a break. A small ATM withdrawal in a coastal town called Harborview, about 3 hours north. The amount was tiny, the kind someone might take out if they were trying to stay under the radar. James didn't waste a second. He drove straight to Harborview, his heart pounding the entire way. Harborview was a small fishing village, the kind of place where tourists came in summer and locals kept to themselves the rest of the year. James checked into a motel and started searching. For 3 days, he visited every business in town. Every cafe, every shop, every restaurant. He showed Natalie's picture to anyone who would look. Most people shook their heads. Until finally, on the 4th day, a teenager working at a grocery store nodded. "Yeah, I've seen her. She works at the Lighthouse Cafe on the north end of town." James's hands started shaking. After all this time, all this searching, he'd found her. James sat in his car outside the Lighthouse Cafe for almost an hour before he found the courage to go inside. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. What would he say to her? How would she react? Would she even want to see him? Finally, he took a deep breath and walked in. The cafe was small and cozy, with large windows overlooking the harbor. Only a few customers sat scattered at tables. And there, behind the counter wiping down the espresso machine, was Natalie. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, dyed a darker brown. She was thinner than he remembered, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of months of fear and sleepless nights. But it was definitely her. His Natalie. James sat down at a corner table, his hands trembling. A different waitress came to take his order. He asked for coffee, barely able to speak. He watched Natalie move around behind the counter, noticing how she always seemed nervous, how her eyes darted to the door every time someone entered. She was scared. Even here, even now, she was still terrified. James waited until the cafe was nearly empty, just before closing time. Natalie was cleaning tables, her back to him. He stood up and walked slowly toward her. "Natalie," he said softly. She froze. The cloth fell from her hand. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't breathe. Then slowly, she turned around. When their eyes met, James saw shock, fear, confusion, and something else flash across her face. Recognition. And maybe, just maybe, hope. "James," she whispered, her voice breaking. How did you?" "Please don't be scared," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help." Natalie looked around frantically, like she was looking for an escape route. "You shouldn't be here. If Kevin finds out if he followed you..." "He didn't follow me. Natalie, please. Just listen. The babies. Emma and Ava. They're safe. They're with me." At the mention of her daughters, Natalie's legs seemed to give out. She grabbed the edge of a table to steady herself, tears immediately flooding her eyes. "They're alive," she gasped. "They're okay? They're more than okay. James said, stepping closer. They're beautiful and healthy and perfect, just like their mother. Natalie pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back sobs. You've been taking care of them? This whole time? James nodded, his own eyes getting wet. From the moment I found them in the snow. Natalie, the note you left. I didn't know it was you. I didn't know until a few days ago. I didn't know where else to go, Natalie said, tears streaming down her face. I remembered you. I remembered how kind you were, how you always talked about wanting a family. I prayed you would help them. Of course I helped them, James said. Natalie, I love them. They're my daughters now, too. For a moment, they just stood there, years of separation and pain and lost time hanging between them. Then Natalie asked the question he knew was coming. Can I see them? That's why I'm here, James said with a gentle smile. To take you home to them. Natalie looked around the cafe at the simple life she'd built in hiding. But Kevin, he's still looking for me. He filed reports saying I kidnapped the babies. James, if he finds us. He won't, James said firmly, taking her hands in his. I have the best lawyers in Boston. We'll fight this together. You're not alone anymore, Natalie. I promise. Natalie searched his eyes, looking for any reason not to trust him. But all she found was sincerity and determination and something deeper. Something that reminded her of when they were young and in love and believed they could conquer the world together. Okay, she finally whispered. Take me to my babies. The drive back to Boston was quiet at first. Natalie sat in the passenger seat, nervously twisting her hands in her lap. Finally, she spoke. Tell me about them. Please. Tell me everything. And James did. He told her about that terrible snowy night, about how he'd nearly frozen trying to save them, about learning to change diapers and prepare bottles and function on 2 hours of sleep. He told her about Emma's adventurous spirit and Ava's thoughtful nature, about their first smiles and their favorite toys and the silly songs he sang to help them sleep. Natalie listened with tears running down her face, but she was smiling through the pain of all the moments she'd missed, but grateful that her daughters had been loved and cared for. You named them Emma and Ava, she said softly. They're beautiful names. They're beautiful girls, James replied. Just like you. As they got closer to Boston, Natalie grew more nervous. What if they don't know me? What if they're scared of me? James reached over and took her hand. Natalie, you're their mother. They'll know you. Trust me. When they finally pulled up to James's mansion, Natalie gasped. This is where they've been living? This is home, James said simply. You're home too, for as long as you need it. Isabella was waiting at the door with Emma and Ava. The moment the car stopped, Natalie was out of her seat, walking toward her babies with tears streaming down her face. Time seemed to stop. Natalie dropped to her knees, her arms outstretched. The twins, now 6 months old, looked at this stranger with curiosity. Then Ava smiled, and Emma reached out her little arms. Mama. Emma babbled, the word clear as a bell. Natalie broke. She gathered both girls into her arms, holding them so tight, crying and kissing their faces over and over. Emma and Ava laughed, clearly happy even if they didn't fully understand what was happening. James watched from a few steps away, his own vision blurred with tears. This was what he'd been working toward. This moment of pure love and reunion. A family, finally whole again. The first few weeks after Natalie's return were filled with healing and adjustment. She couldn't stop touching her daughters, as if she needed constant reassurance that they were real, that she was really home. Emma and Ava adapted quickly, splitting their affection between their mother and James naturally, as if they'd always known they belonged to both of them. James gave Natalie space and time. He understood she needed to rebuild her bond with her daughters. But he also made sure she knew she wasn't alone in this fight. He hired the best family law attorneys in Massachusetts, and together they built a case against Kevin. The evidence was overwhelming. Medical records showing Natalie's injuries from Kevin's abuse. Testimony from neighbors who had heard the fights and seen the bruises. Even Kevin's own aggressive behavior when questioned by police worked against him. The legal battle took 6 months, but finally, the judge made his ruling. Natalie was granted full custody of Emma and Ava. The divorce was finalized. Kevin was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from Natalie and the children at all times. When the verdict was read, Natalie collapsed in the courtroom, sobbing with relief. James held her as she cried, tears of freedom this time, not fear. "It's over," she whispered against his chest. "It's really, truly over." "It's over," James confirmed, kissing the top of her head. "You're free. They're safe. We can finally just live." And that's exactly what they did. They lived. Natalie started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of her marriage. Slowly, the fear that had lived in her eyes began to fade. She started writing again, something she hadn't done in years. Her first short story was published in a literary magazine, and James framed it and hung it in his office. For James, life became something he'd never imagined it could be. His mornings started with pancakes and chaos as Emma and Ava demanded stories and playtime. His afternoons were spent working, but now from home, always close to his family. His evenings were filled with laughter and bath time and bedtime stories read in silly voices. And Natalie. Being with Natalie again felt like coming home after a long journey. They took things slow, rebuilding the trust and love they'd once shared. Late nights were spent talking after the girls were asleep, sharing everything they'd been through, healing together. One spring evening, as they watched Emma and Ava play in the garden, James turned to Natalie with a serious expression. "Natalie, there's something I want to ask you." She looked at him curiously, a slight smile on her lips. "What is it?" James took a deep breath. "I want to officially adopt the girls. I want to be their father in every legal sense. I want us to be a real family." Natalie's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "James, you already are their father. You've been their father from the moment you saved them from that storm." "I know," James said, taking her hands. "But I want to make it official. I want them to have my name. I want everyone to know that Emma and Ava Carter are my daughters." The adoption process took several months, but when it was finalized, they threw a huge celebration. It coincided with the twins' first birthday, and James's mansion was transformed into a wonderland of balloons, streamers, and laughter. Friends and family gathered from all over. Isabella was there, crying happy tears. Walter drove down from Providence to celebrate. Even some of James's business partners, who had watched him transform from a workaholic into a devoted father, came to join the joy. As everyone sang happy birthday, and the twins blew out their candles with help from their parents, James looked around at all the people they loved. His heart felt so full he thought it might burst. Later that night, after all the guests had left and the twins were finally asleep, James and Natalie stood on the balcony of the master bedroom. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and a warm spring breeze carried the scent of the garden flowers. "You know what I've been thinking about?" James said, pulling Natalie close. "What's that?" she asked, leaning into his embrace. "About how I used to measure success. Biggest deals. Most money. Fastest growth. I thought that was what life was about." He paused, looking through the window at the room where their daughters slept. "But I was so wrong." Natalie looked up at him, her eyes soft in the moonlight. "What do you think success is now?" James smiled. "This. Right here.
You, Emma, Ava.
Our family. This is success. This is what makes life worth living. Everything else is just noise." "We've come a long way," Natalie said softly, "from where we started." "We have," James agreed. "And every struggle, every tear, every moment of fear or uncertainty led us here. To this perfect moment. And I wouldn't change a single thing." Inspired by his journey, James announced the creation of the Carter Foundation, dedicated to helping survivors of domestic violence and children in crisis. He wanted to use his resources to help others find the same hope and happiness his family had found. "Our story has a happy ending," he told the crowd at the foundation's launch event, Natalie by his side. "And I'm going to do everything in my power to help other families find their happy endings too." The months that followed were filled with the beautiful, messy chaos of family life. Mornings began with tiny feet running into the bedroom. Afternoons were spent teaching the girls to walk in the garden while Natalie took pictures. Evenings ended with everyone curled up together, reading books and making up songs. One night, standing at the door of the twins' room and watching them sleep, James felt Natalie's hand slip into his. "Happy," she whispered. "Happier than I ever knew was possible," he replied. "Because that's the truth about real happiness. It doesn't come from money or success or achievement. It comes from love, from family, from the people who make your house a home and your life worth living. Sometimes the best blessings come in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes the family you're meant to have finds you in the middle of a snowstorm. And sometimes love gets a second chance to bloom, stronger and more beautiful than ever before." This is the Carter family story. A story of survival, sacrifice, and second chances. A story that proves no matter how dark the storm, there's always hope for sunshine. A story that shows us the strongest force in the world isn't money or power. It's love. And as James and Natalie stood there, watching their daughters sleep peacefully, they knew with absolute certainty that their greatest adventure was just beginning. Because that's what families do. They hold on through the storms. They never give up on each other. And they love each other no matter what. Thanks for your watching. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to the Story Room for meaningful stories that inspire and teach life lessons.